Olivia Carter sat at the head of the long, polished conference table, fingers interlaced as she listened to her executive team discuss quarterly projections. She had built Bright Tech Solutions from the ground up, a company once lauded for its innovation and commitment to diversity. But over the past year, troubling reports had begun to surface. Allegations that disabled employees were being marginalized, passed over for promotions, or subtly pushed out. She had asked for explanations. Each time, she was met with dismissive reassurances. "We hire based on merit, not pity," her HR director had said with a tight-lipped smile. "We have policies in place," another executive had added. Yet, when she dug deeper, she found troubling inconsistencies. Requests for workplace accommodations denied, exit interviews from disabled employees citing hostile work environments, and an unsettling pattern of high turnover among those who needed accessibility support. Her executives refused to acknowledge a problem existed. That left Olivia with only one option. 3 days later, she stood in front of a full-length mirror in her penthouse bathroom, barely recognizing herself. Gone was the sleek, composed CEO who graced magazine covers. In her place stood Samantha Blake, an entry-level data processor with a fabricated backstory and a limp caused by a prosthetic leg, an illusion crafted by a medical-grade brace and subtle adjustments to her gait. Her usual tailored suits had been swapped for a cheap, ill-fitting blouse and slacks. With graying streaks in her auburn hair, thick glasses, and a fabricated work history, she was unremarkable, easily overlooked. As her driver dropped her off a block away from her company's headquarters, she felt a foreign sense of unease. She had walked into this building 1,000 times before, but never like this. Never as someone who had to prove they belonged. The first challenge came immediately. The building's revolving doors spun too quickly for her altered pace. Olivia hesitated before stepping through, struggling slightly, only to find herself nearly colliding with a passing employee. The man sighed in irritation and strode past without a word. No one held the door. No one acknowledged her presence. Inside, the reception area buzzed with a familiar morning rush. Employees chatting over coffee, others moving with determined purpose toward their departments. Olivia approached the front desk, where a young receptionist glanced up from her computer. "Yes." "Samantha Blake," Olivia said, clearing her throat. "It's my first day." The receptionist barely glanced at her screen before nodding toward a side door. "HR is down the hall. 4th office on the right." No warm welcome. No offer of assistance. Just a dismissive gesture toward a hallway she already knew well. She made her way down, each step a study and observation. She noted the lack of accessible pathways, the narrow layout of workstations, the subtle yet unmistakable division between employees. When she arrived at the HR office, Karen Dawson, the company's longtime HR supervisor, barely looked up from a stack of papers. "Name?" "Samantha Blake." Karen flipped through a file. "Data processing. Your report to Rick Spencer. He's expecting you." She handed Olivia a badge without explanation and pointed toward a cluster of cubicles past the main floor. Workstation 15. No introductions. No small talk. Olivia had been in HR meetings before, where new hires were greeted with enthusiasm and given an overview of company values. That warmth was absent here. As Olivia navigated the sea of desks, she caught the lingering stares of few employees. Some were indifferent, others merely curious. But then there were the looks of quiet pity. She reached her workstation, a small, cluttered desk in the farthest corner of the department. The chair was slightly too high, forcing her to shift awkwardly. The computer was an older model, the keyboard stiff beneath her fingers. As she powered it on, she heard a sigh nearby. "You're the new one?" She turned to see a man in his early 30s, his shirt sleeves rolled up, a Bluetooth earpiece in one ear. His nameplate read Rick Spencer. "That's me," she replied. "Right." He exhaled, glancing at his watch. "I don't have time for a long orientation. So here's the deal. You'll be handling data entry. Simple enough. Log the numbers, double-check for errors, and don't slow the system down." His gaze flickered to her leg. "We run a tight ship here." Olivia noted the implication. "I understand," she said evenly. "Good." He tapped her desk. Don't waste time with unnecessary questions. If you need help, ask Melissa. He motioned toward a woman at the next desk before walking away without another word. Melissa, a woman with short, dark curls and sharp brown eyes, turned slightly in her chair. Olivia immediately noticed the way she held herself, shoulders tense, fingers drumming lightly against the desk. "Welcome to the fun house," Melissa muttered. Olivia smiled. "Samantha." "Melissa. Been here 4 years. Still waiting for my official promotion." She shot a glance toward Rick. "It's an endurance game." Olivia's fingers hovered over her keyboard. "Endurance?" Melissa leaned in, voice low. "The unspoken rules? Keep your head down. Work harder than everyone else. And don't, under any circumstances, ask for accommodations." Olivia kept her expression neutral. "Why not?" "Because they'll start keeping track," Melissa said. "And the ones they keep track of, they don't last long." A chill ran through Olivia. The hours passed in a haze of keystrokes and quiet observations. Every time Olivia asked a question, Rick answered with visible impatience. Others avoided eye contact altogether. When she tried to join a casual conversation between colleagues, the topic shifted the moment she approached. Lunchtime arrived. Olivia followed the flow of employees toward the cafeteria, only to find herself subtly shut out of the seating arrangements. Employees clustered together, their usual groups forming instinctively. Melissa sat alone at the edge of the room, eating quickly as if used to finishing meals unnoticed. Olivia approached. "Mind if I join you?" Melissa glanced up, surprised, before shrugging. "Suit yourself." She sat down, lowering herself carefully into the seat. A moment passed before Melissa exhaled. "You're new, so let me save you some trouble. You notice it already, right?" Olivia took a measured bite of her salad. "Notice what?" Melissa gestured subtly with her fork. "Who sits where? Who talks to whom? Who gets promoted? Who doesn't?" Olivia followed her gaze. It was clear now. Disabled employees, though few, were always on the outskirts, never in the inner circles, never fully integrated. "How long have you wanted that promotion?" Olivia asked. Melissa laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Long enough to know it's not coming." She poked at her food. "I was supposed to be in line for team lead last year. Had the numbers, the experience. Then my final interview got postponed indefinitely. Because of your disability?" Melissa looked her in the eye. "Because I don't fit the image." Olivia's chest tightened. The rest of the day passed in much the same way. Dismissive glances. Small but significant slights. By the time she logged off, Olivia felt a weight in her chest she hadn't experienced before. She had expected bias. She hadn't expected it to be this ingrained, this systematic. As she walked toward the exit, she heard Rick mutter to another manager, "You think she'll last?" The other man chuckled. 2 weeks, max. By the second week, Olivia had memorized the rhythm of the office. The way conversations hushed when she entered a room. The way Rick barely acknowledged her presence unless it was to assign more tedious work. The way Melissa and a handful of other disabled employees moved through the space like shadows, unnoticed and undervalued. The company she had built, the culture she had once believed in, was nothing more than a carefully curated illusion. She arrived early that morning, as she always did, settling into her desk before the hum of work began. The keyboard was stiff under her fingers, a relic of outdated equipment that no one had bothered to replace. She had put in a request for an ergonomic version, citing wrist strain, but the email had gone unanswered. Across the room, she caught Jonah rubbing his temples, his screen adjusted to maximum brightness because the company's software didn't support screen readers properly. He had been fighting for an accommodation request for weeks, only to be told it was under review. Rick's voice cut through the office. "Team meeting. 5 minutes." Olivia stood, adjusting the brace on her leg, and moved toward the conference area where a handful of employees were already seated. The usual hierarchy was clear. Rick and the senior team sat closest to projector, while employees like Melissa, Jonah, and herself were relegated to the outskirts. "All right," Rick began, flipping through a report. "Productivity is down this quarter. We need to tighten things up." His eyes skimmed the room before landing on Jonah. That means fewer mistakes and less time wasted on. He hesitated just long enough for the implication to be clear. Jonah didn't react, but Olivia saw the tension in his jaw. Rick continued, outlining new efficiency measures that, to Olivia's trained ear, were specifically designed to phase out anyone who needed extra time or accommodations. When he was done, he opened the floor for questions. A few hands went up, but Olivia spoke first. "What steps are we taking to improve accessibility?" she asked, her voice measured. Rick's expression flickered with annoyance. "Excuse me? For disabled employees," she clarified. "You mentioned improving productivity. What's being done to ensure everyone has the tools to perform at their best?" Rick sighed. "We provide the standard tools necessary for the job. If someone can't keep up, maybe this isn't the right environment for them." A silence settled over the room, heavy and unspoken. Olivia felt a sharp sting of anger, but she kept her tone even. "So you're saying it's the employees' fault that they struggle due to a lack of accommodations?" Rick's jaw tensed. "I'm saying we don't lower the bar." Melissa let out a quiet laugh, shaking her head. "Right, because hiring disabled employees is just charity work, right?" Rick's eyes narrowed. "Melissa, if you have an issue, you can take it up with HR." "Oh, like I did last year," she shot back, "when I applied for promotion and was mysteriously passed over." A few employees exchanged wary glances. Rick's lips pressed into a thin line. "If you're unhappy here, no one's forcing you to stay." The words landed like a slap. Olivia clenched her fists beneath the table. When the meeting ended, Jonah muttered, "You shouldn't have pushed him like that," as they walked back to their desks. Melissa exhaled. He was going to come after me either way. Olivia sat down, her mind racing. Rick wasn't just a bad manager. He was actively hostile. He wielded his authority like a weapon, ensuring that employees like Melissa and Jonah were kept in their place. And the worst part? No one in leadership seemed to care. The next few days only solidified Olivia's growing rage. When she asked for a second monitor to help with data input, her request was ignored. When Jonah brought up an error caused by the outdated software, Rick scolded him for making excuses. When Melissa finished a project ahead of schedule, Rick took the credit. Then came the final straw. It was a quiet afternoon when Olivia overheard two senior employees talking in the break room. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but the moment she caught Rick's name, she paused just beyond the doorway. "She's next," one of them said, laughing under his breath. "Melissa?" the other replied. "Finally. About time Rick got rid of her." "Yeah, he's just waiting for the right excuse. Apparently, she's not a good fit for company culture." Olivia's heart pounded. They weren't even subtle about it. She walked back to her desk, her pulse hammering in her ears. This wasn't incompetence. This wasn't oversight. This was a deliberate strategy. Melissa's days were numbered, and if Olivia didn't act soon, she wouldn't be the last. Olivia had spent years negotiating high-stakes deals, outmaneuvering competitors, and turning Bright Tech into a powerhouse in the industry. But nothing had prepared her for the fury that burned in her chest now. Every day she remained undercover. The rot in her company became clearer. Bias wasn't just an occasional oversight. It was embedded in the foundation of the workplace, poisoning every interaction, every decision. She had seen enough. It was time to act. She started with HR. Olivia requested a meeting with Karen Dawson, the HR supervisor whose indifference had set the tone for the department. When she arrived at Karen's office, the woman barely looked up from her monitor. "Make it quick," Karen said, tapping at her keyboard. "Busy day." Olivia lowered herself into the chair, adjusting her brace slightly for effect. "I wanted to ask about the company's process for handling workplace discrimination." Karen exhaled through her nose. "Discrimination?" "Yes, specifically toward disabled employees." Karen's lips twitched into something between amusement and irritation. "We have policies in place." "Policies that aren't enforced," Olivia countered. "I've witnessed employees being excluded from promotions, denied accommodations, and targeted for layoffs." Karen leaned back, folding her arms. "Look, Samantha, I don't know what stories you've been hearing, but this company hires based on skill and performance. If someone isn't advancing, maybe they aren't leadership material. Olivia let the silence stretch between them before she spoke again. So, when Melissa was denied a promotion despite exceeding every benchmark, was that based on performance? Karen's expression darkened. That's confidential. I heard 2 senior employees say she's being pushed out. That doesn't sound confidential. It sounds calculated. Karen's jaw tightened. I don't have to explain company decisions to you. No, Olivia agreed, standing. But soon, you'll have to explain them to someone who matters. She left before Karen could respond, her pulse steady, her plan falling into place. The final step was Rick. She found him in the break room later that day, leaning against the counter as he scrolled through his phone. He barely glanced at her when she approached. What? He muttered. I need to talk to you, Olivia said evenly. Rick sighed and pocketed his phone. Make it fast. Olivia met his gaze. I know about Melissa. His expression flickered. What about her? I know you're planning to push her out. Rick smirked. Oh, so she sent you to fight her battles now? That's cute. She doesn't know I'm here, Olivia said, her voice dangerously calm. But I've been paying attention. You never intended to promote her. You humiliate Jonah every chance you get. You refuse to provide basic accommodations because you don't think people like us deserve them. Rick scoffed. People like you? Olivia took a step closer. You think I don't belong here, that I'm disposable. But what happens when the people you dismiss decide they've had enough? Rick shook his head, laughing under his breath. This is the real world, sweetheart. Some people just don't make the cut. Olivia smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Funny, that's exactly what I was thinking about you. She turned and walked away, leaving him with a smirk. One that would disappear soon enough. The next morning, an emergency company-wide meeting was called. Employees filed into the large conference room, murmuring among themselves, sensing something unusual in the air. At the front of the room, executives stood in a row, their faces unreadable. Then Olivia entered. No cane, no brace, no disguise. A ripple of confusion spread through the room. Employees who had ignored her for weeks now gawked in shock. Rick's smirk faltered. Karen stiffened. Olivia sat at her desk, staring at the flickering cursor on her screen, the weight of what she had uncovered pressing down on her like a vice. The discrimination wasn't just passive neglect. It was an intentional, systemic effort to sideline employees who didn't fit a narrow mold. She had seen it firsthand. The dismissals, the snide comments, the roadblocks disguised as company policy. And worst of all, she had seen the fear, the quiet resignation in Jonah's eyes, the exhaustion in Melissa's voice. They had long since stopped expecting change. But change was coming. The next morning, Olivia walked into the office, this time not as Samantha Blake, the overlooked data processor, but as Olivia Carter, the CEO of Bright Tech Solutions. The transformation was as simple as shedding a disguise, but the shift in energy was immediate. Whispers rippled through the room as employees recognized her. Melissa's jaw tightened in shock. Rick, who had been mid-conversation with a senior executive, paled visibly. She didn't stop. She strode past the rows of desks, past the stunned faces, and straight into the executive conference room, where the leadership team was gathered for their weekly strategy meeting. The room fell silent. Olivia closed the door behind her and turned to face them. "Sit down," she ordered, her voice quiet but sharp. No one hesitated. She moved to the head of the table, the seat she had occupied for years. Yet today it felt different, heavier. "I've spent the last 3 weeks undercover in this company," she began, scanning their faces. 3 weeks as an entry-level employee. 3 weeks as someone you didn't think mattered. She let the words sink in. And what I saw, what I experienced, was unacceptable. Karen from HR shifted uncomfortably. "Ms. Carter, I'm not sure what you mean." "Don't." Olivia cut her off. "I know exactly what I mean." She reached into the folder she had brought with her and laid out printouts, emails, complaints that had been buried, performance reviews that showed a clear pattern of bias. "I have proof that disabled employees are being overlooked, dismissed, and forced out of this company. I have recordings of managers, *** managers, mocking them, calling accommodations a waste of resources. Her gaze locked onto Rick, whose face had gone rigid. I have documentation that shows qualified employees, like Melissa, like Jonah, have been repeatedly denied opportunities, not because of performance, but because of perception. No one spoke. Olivia leaned forward, her voice deadly calm. This company is my legacy, and I will not allow it to be rotted from the inside by people who think discrimination is just business as usual. Rick swallowed hard. You're fired, she said, cutting him off. A sharp intake of breath rippled through the room. Rick's mouth opened, then closed. He looked around, as if expecting someone to intervene, but no one did. He pushed back on the table and left without another word. Olivia turned to Karen next. You allowed this to happen under your watch. You silenced complaints. You let good employees suffer because it was easier than confronting the problem. Karen paled. I was following policy. Then the policy is broken, and you're suspended until further notice while we conduct a full HR audit. Karen swallowed but nodded, knowing better than to argue. Olivia let out a slow breath. Things are going to change around here. Effective immediately, we're conducting a company-wide accessibility audit. Every employee's needs will be met, no exceptions. Promotion criteria will be reassessed, and anyone found to have engaged in discriminatory practices will face consequences. She turned her gaze toward the executives, who had remained silent. If anyone has a problem with that, now is the time to leave. No one moved. She gave a curt nod. Then let's get to work. The meeting adjourned, and Olivia stepped back on the main floor. Employees were watching her, a mixture of uncertainty and quiet hope on their faces. She made her way to Melissa's desk. You have a meeting with me this afternoon, Olivia told her. Melissa raised an eyebrow. Do I? For a leadership position. Olivia's lips quirked. Long overdue. A slow smile spread across Melissa's face. Jonah approached hesitantly. Does this mean things are really going to change? Olivia met his gaze, her own steady. Yes, she said, and I'm going to make sure of it. For the first time since she had walked into this company as Samantha Blake, she felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. And this time, she wasn't just observing the problem. She was fixing it.